Gina Reyes was pouring black coffee for a man who controlled half the city when she realized someone planned to kill him in the next 4 minutes. Rosie's Diner never went silent at 3:15 a.m. on a Thursday morning. The late-night crowd needed their caffeine fix. Insomniacs claimed their usual booths. The neon sign outside buzzed with reliable consistency, casting pink light across cracked vinyl seats. But for the last 2 minutes, no one new had walked through that door. The traffic on Lexington Avenue had stopped completely. Not slowed, stopped. Even the homeless man who usually slept against the building across the street had vanished like he'd never existed. Then they started arriving. 6 men entered first, moving wrong. Their eyes didn't search for empty tables or scan the menu board. They measured sightlines and counted exits. They positioned themselves with surgical precision, covering every angle of the small dining room. 6 more followed. Then another 8 pushed through the door in a coordinated wave. Gina kept wiping down tables and refilling sugar dispensers, her movements calm and routine even as she counted. 30 men, all armed, judging by the way their jackets hung heavy on one side, all focused on one target, the man in booth 7. Carlo Caruso sat with his back against the wall, a survival habit that had kept him alive through 20 years of running the city's underworld. He had 2 bodyguards positioned near the entrance, both trying to appear relaxed and failing miserably. The cherry pie in front of Carlo sat untouched. The coffee beside it had gone cold 15 minutes ago. This diner had been his sanctuary for 3 years, the one place where one of the country's most feared crime bosses could pretend to be ordinary for an hour, read yesterday's newspaper, taste something besides fear and blood. That illusion shattered when the final man walked in and turned the deadbolt on the front door behind him. Carlo's entire body went motionless. His eyes swept the room in one fluid motion, counting threats, calculating odds, measuring the distance to his weapon against 30 guns that were absolutely faster. The mathematics were vicious and simple. He wasn't walking out of here alive. His guards realized it half a second later. Their hands drifted toward their weapons, slow and deliberate, knowing it wouldn't change the outcome. The leader of the group stepped forward, satisfaction spreading across his angular face, tailored suit, hollow eyes, and a distinctive scar running along his jawline. Gina recognized the marking instantly. Marchetti family, Roman mob. They'd been trying to take control of the city's operations for 5 years, losing territory and soldiers every time they clashed with Carlo Caruso. Tonight was their reckoning. "Mr. Caruso," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "No more games." Carlo's guards went for their weapons. 4 different shooters cut them down before the guns cleared their holsters. The sound tore through the small diner, deafening and absolute. Both guards collapsed in spreading pools of red, and Carlo stood alone against 30 killers. He didn't flinch. He rose slowly from the booth, hands clearly visible, his expression revealing nothing. Whatever terror he felt stayed buried behind eyes that had witnessed too much death to fear his own. "You want information?" Carlo said, his voice steady. "Or would I already have a bullet in my skull?" The leader moved closer, emboldened by the numbers. "Bank accounts, distribution networks, names of every politician and cop on your payroll. You give us everything. Maybe you die with dignity. Maybe we make it quick. And if I refuse? Then you die slowly, and we torture it out of the next person in your organization. Either way, the Caruso empire ends tonight." Carlo actually laughed, and the sound held no humor whatsoever. "Then I guess we're going to be here a while." Gina watched from behind the counter, still gripping a coffee pot, still playing the role of paralyzed waitress. None of them spared her a glance. She was invisible, just another piece of furniture, harmless, forgettable. No threat at all. They had no idea that the most dangerous person in Rosie's Diner wasn't the Mafia boss in booth 7. It was the waitress who had just decided to stop running. If you're gripped right now by this impossible standoff, one waitress against 30 killers, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 2,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Gina's hand moved on autopilot, refilling the sugar dispenser while her mind calculated trajectories and kill zones. 3 years of pouring coffee hadn't dulled her instincts. They'd just gone dormant, waiting. The lead assassin positioned himself 12 feet from Carlo's booth, optimal range for a headshot, far enough to avoid splatter, close enough to guarantee accuracy. Professional distance. She'd seen it before, in Damascus, when a target needed to die publicly but cleanly. Her eyes tracked the deployment pattern: 6 men covering exits, 8 forming a perimeter, 16 floating reserves ready to respond to resistance. It was textbook military suppression. Whoever planned this operation knew exactly what they were doing. Then she saw his face. Viktor Kozlov. The scar along his jaw was new, probably from the Minsk operation that went sideways 2 years after she disappeared. But the dead eyes were the same. The man who'd trained half the contract killers working Eastern Europe. The man who'd once told her that hesitation was just suicide with extra steps. He swept the diner one final time, his gaze passing over her like she was wallpaper. She kept her posture soft, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, the universal body language of someone who desperately didn't want to be noticed. Victor's attention moved on. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? The woman he'd known moved like a weapon. This waitress moved like a ghost. A memory flickered, sharp and unwanted. Her team leader's voice during extraction training. You assess, you act, or you die. Those are your only options. She'd chosen option 3 once before, watched her entire team get executed while she stayed hidden in the crawl space of a safe house in Kandahar, clutching classified documents and her own cowardice. She'd survived. They hadn't. The elderly man in the back booth was fumbling for his phone, hands shaking. The line cook had frozen by the grill, spatula still raised. Carlo sat perfectly still, already accepting his death with the calm of someone who'd earned it. 4 innocent people, 30 killers, 1 invisible waitress. The math was brutal, but it was hers to solve. Gina set down the sugar dispenser and picked up the coffee pot. The liquid inside was still boiling. Her reflection wavered in the stainless steel surface, and for just a moment, she saw someone she'd buried 3 years ago. Victor raised his weapon, and Gina Reyes made her choice. Carlo had survived 20 years in a business where most men died within 5 by following one simple rule: always know the room better than the room knows you. Tonight, that rule had failed him spectacularly. He'd noticed the phone signal die 8 minutes ago. Not weak, dead. Military-grade jamming equipment, probably parked in one of the black SUVs outside. The kind of hardware that cost 6 figures and required government connections to acquire. The Marchettis had upgraded. His backup piece pressed against his spine, loaded and useless. He could draw, maybe take down 3 men before the remaining 27 turned him into Swiss cheese. Heroic, stupid, dead. Carlo had built an empire on controlled violence, on thinking 3 moves ahead while his enemies were still figuring out move 1. He'd turned the Chicago underworld into a chessboard where he always played white, always moved first, always won. Except tonight, someone else had been playing a different game entirely, and he'd walked right into checkmate. His eyes tracked Viktor Kozlov, recognizing the man from reputation alone. The Marchettis hadn't sent soldiers, they'd sent an executioner, the kind of professional who charged $250,000 per job and had never failed to deliver. Carlo's breathing stayed even. If he was going to die, he'd do it with the dignity his father had taught him. No begging, no bargaining. Just the quiet acceptance that every man in this business earned the same retirement plan eventually. Then he noticed the waitress. Gina. He'd been coming here every Thursday for 3 years, and he'd never learned her last name. She always had his coffee ready before he sat down, never asked questions, never made small talk, just refilled his cup and left him alone with his newspaper and his thoughts. Most people in the diner were frozen, the line cook, the old man in the back, even his own guards before they'd stupidly gone for their guns. But Gina kept moving. Not panicked movement, not the jerky, random motion of someone in shock. She moved with purpose, shifting position behind the counter, adjusting angles. Her left hand stayed near the coffee pot. Her right hand disappeared below the counter edge for just a moment before reappearing. Her eyes weren't wide with fear. They were calculating. Carlo had spent 2 decades reading people, separating the predators from the prey, the killers from the civilians. He'd built his empire on that instinct. And every instinct he possessed was screaming that his waitress wasn't civilian at all. She caught his eye for half a second. Something passed between them. Not a plea for help, not terror, recognition. 3 years ago, Kandahar province. Gina crouched in the crawlspace beneath the safehouse floorboards, breathing through her mouth to stay silent. Above her, 6 feet of wood and dust separated her from the execution. The mission had been simple: extract Dr. Petrov, a Russian biochemist with a conscience and a thumb drive full of weaponized pathogen research, get him across the border, deliver him to friendly hands, collect payment, go home. Simple, until someone sold them out. Through the gaps in the floorboards, she watched Malik take the first bullet, her team leader, the man who'd trained her, trusted her, made her better than she thought possible. He went down reaching for his weapon, never making it. Chen died next, then Rodriguez, then the twins, Sarah and Marcus, who'd celebrated their 30th birthday the week before with cheap whiskey and worse jokes. 6 shots, 6 bodies, 12 seconds. Dr. Petrov screamed until they made him stop permanently. Gina pressed her fist against her mouth, tasting blood where her teeth cut into her knuckles. The classified thumb drive sat in her vest pocket, warm against her ribs. The thing they'd all died for, the thing she could have used to bargain for their lives. She made the calculation in half a second. 7 people dead, or 7 people dead plus the research getting out. The math was cold, necessary, unforgivable. The extraction team that hit the safe house spoke 3 different languages: Russian, Mandarin, Arabic. Multiple governments, multiple agencies, all hunting the same information. Which meant there was nowhere safe to run, nowhere to hide, no friendly agency to turn to when everyone wanted what she carried. She'd waited in that crawl space for 4 hours after they left, waited until her legs cramped and her team's blood seeped through the floorboards, dripping onto her face like accusatory tears. Then she'd triggered Ghost Protocol, burned her identity, destroyed her credentials, wiped every digital trace. The thumb drive went to a dead drop in Berlin, purchased anonymity from people who traded in secrets. Gina Reyes, decorated operative, disappeared into smoke. What emerged was just Gina, a waitress, a ghost, someone too ordinary to notice, too broken to be dangerous. She'd survived, her team hadn't, and every single night for 3 years she'd heard Malik's voice in her head, asking the same question she couldn't answer. Was living as a coward really better than dying with honor? If that question hit you as hard as it hit Gina, if you've ever wondered what you'd do in an impossible situation, like this video and subscribe. Hit the bell for more stories. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed hidden or fought back? Your answers inspire these tales. Victor had killed 43 people in his career. He'd learned early that the survivors weren't the ones who fought hardest, they were the ones who paid attention. He swept the diner one final time, cataloging threats before giving the order. The line cook by the grill, frozen with fear, no threat. The elderly man in the back booth, fumbling with a dead phone, no threat. Carlo's 2 guards, already bleeding out on the tile floor, neutralized. Then his eyes landed on the waitress behind the counter. Dark hair pulled back, standard uniform, coffee pot in hand. She stood perfectly still, staring at nothing, the way civilians did when violence shattered their safe little world. Except, something nagged at the edge of his awareness, a detail his subconscious caught before his conscious mind could process it. The way she stood, weight distributed evenly on both feet, not frozen in panic, but balanced, ready. The kind of stance that came from years of training, muscle memory that couldn't be faked or forgotten. Her breathing, slow and controlled, even as gunshots still echoed off the walls. Not the shallow, rapid gasps of shock. Combat breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. And her eyes, they weren't wide with terror. They were tracking, moving from target to target, calculating angles and distances with mechanical precision. Victor's hand stilled on his weapon. He'd seen that look before, in Minsk, in Damascus, in Moscow's black sites, the look of someone who'd been trained to assess, to survive, to kill. His mind raced through possibilities: undercover cop, federal agent, private security. But no, the diner had been Carlos' sanctuary for 3 years. She'd been vetted, background checked, deemed harmless. Besides, she was just a waitress, a civilian, background noise. Victor dismissed the thought. Paranoia was useful, but second-guessing every instinct got you killed just as surely as ignoring them. He'd spent 6 months planning this operation, 30 men, perfect timing, overwhelming force. One anxious waitress didn't change the mathematics. He turned his attention back to Carlo, raising his weapon to firing position. The Mafia boss stood with surprising dignity, accepting his fate without theatrics. "Any last words, Mr. Caruso?" Victor asked. Behind him, 30 feet away, Gina Reyes adjusted her grip on the coffee pot, and Victor Kozlov made the last mistake of his career. He forgot to keep watching the waitress. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Gina moved. The coffee pot left her hand in a perfect arc, 17 ounces of boiling liquid and stainless steel spinning through the air. It hit the overhead fluorescent fixture with a spectacular crash. Glass exploded, sparks showered, the diner plunged into absolute darkness. She was already vaulting the counter before the screaming started. 3 years of walking this floor, 3 years of memorizing every table, every chair, every square inch of cracked linoleum. She knew this space better than she knew her own reflection. In the darkness, that knowledge made her a ghost. The closest gunman was 5 feet to her left, exactly where she'd counted him. She moved by sound and memory, her hand finding his weapon before he could pivot. A sharp twist, the crack of breaking fingers. The gun clattered free and she caught it mid-fall. No hesitation, no mercy, just brutal efficiency. She fired twice, center mass. The muzzle flash illuminated his shocked expression for a microsecond before he dropped. Chaos erupted, 30 men shouting, scrambling, firing blindly into darkness. Bullets punched through vinyl booths and shattered the front windows. Carlo hit the floor, instinct overriding dignity. Gina was already moving. She knew the second gunman would be rotating right, standard tactical response. She dropped low, swept his legs, and drove her elbow into his throat as he fell. The wet crunch told her everything she needed to know. "She's behind the counter," someone shouted in Russian. She wasn't. She was 3 steps left, using the industrial dishwasher as cover. A shadow moved in front of her, weapon raised. She grabbed his wrist, redirected his aim, and let him shoot his own partner. Then she broke his arm at the elbow and took his weapon. 2 guns now. Better odds. The emergency exit sign provided the only illumination, a dim red glow that created more shadows than light. It was enough. She could see their silhouettes. They couldn't see her. Victor's voice cut through the pandemonium. "Lights! Someone get the fucking lights!" But the circuit breaker was in the kitchen, 20 feet away through a maze of panicked killers, and Gina had wedged a mop handle through the door before the shooting started. They were trapped in here with her, and she'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The darkness was hers. The fryer had been running for 6 hours. The oil inside was 375 degrees of liquid agony. Gina grabbed the handle and swung. Burning oil arced through the darkness like a wave of liquid fire. 3 men screamed as it found skin. They dropped, clawing at their faces, no longer threats. She disappeared back into shadow before their partners could return fire. Carlo pressed himself against the floor behind booth 7, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. The waitress who'd served him coffee for 3 years was systematically dismantling a 30-man hit squad with nothing but kitchen equipment and absolute brutality. A gunman stumbled past Carlo's position, searching blindly. Gina materialized behind him like smoke given form. One hand covered his mouth, the other drove a steak knife up under his ribs, angling toward the heart. Clinical, efficient, silent. She was gone before the body finished falling. "She's in the kitchen!" Victor's voice, losing its professional calm. She wasn't in the kitchen. She was at the industrial dishwasher, yanking open the steam valve. Pressurized vapor exploded outward in a scalding cloud. 2 more men went down, skin blistering, vision gone. The emergency exit sign cast everything in crimson shadow. Carlo watched her move through it like a demon, appearing only to kill and vanishing before retaliation came. She used the environment like a weapon, turning familiar objects into instruments of destruction. A napkin dispenser became a blunt force trauma tool. Broken glass from the shattered windows became shrapnel. The metal napkin holders became improvised brass knuckles. She moved with a precision that transcended training. This wasn't self-defense. This was art. Violent, terrible art. Victor fired toward movement. Bullets sparked off stainless steel. Gina was already 3 steps left, coming up behind another gunman. She broke his knee backward, stole his weapon mid-collapse, and put 2 rounds into the man beside him. 17 down, 13 remaining. The math was shifting. Carlo heard Victor shouting orders in Russian, trying to coordinate a response. But coordination required communication, and communication required knowing where your enemy was. Gina was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost with a body count. She vaulted onto the counter, slid across it in the darkness, and dropped into a group of 3 clustered near the door. In the chaos that followed, Carlo heard bones breaking, men choking, weapons clattering to tile. When she emerged from the tangle of bodies, she was holding 2 more guns. 10 left. And Victor was finally starting to understand what Carlo had realized 5 minutes ago. They weren't hunting the waitress. She was hunting them. The lights flickered back on with a mechanical hum that sounded obscene in the sudden silence. Carlo blinked against the harsh fluorescent glare, his eyes adjusting to reveal a scene that looked like a war zone. Bodies sprawled across vinyl booths and cracked tile. Blood pooled around overturned tables. The smell of gunpowder and burned oil hung thick in the air. 30 men had walked into Rosie's diner. 29 would never walk out. Victor lay on his back near the counter, both legs shattered at unnatural angles, his weapon 10 feet away. His chest rose and fell in shallow, painful breaths, but his eyes were wide open, staring at the waitress with an expression Carlo had never seen on a professional killer's face before. Recognition and absolute disbelief. "Reyes," Victor whispered, the name coming out like a prayer or a curse. "You were dead. They said you were dead." Gina didn't respond. She'd retrieved a worn canvas bag from beneath the counter, the kind of go bag someone kept packed for exactly this scenario. Carlo pushed himself to his feet, legs unsteady. His guards were both alive, he realized with shock, unconscious, bleeding but breathing. She'd positioned their bodies in the safest corner of the diner before the shooting started, shielded them with overturned tables. The elderly man in the back booth sat perfectly still, his hands over his ears, eyes squeezed shut. Carlo understood immediately. Gina made sure he never saw her face, never witnessed anything that could identify her later, protecting the innocent while executing the guilty. The line cook stood frozen by the grill, spatula still clutched in his trembling hand, his eyes glazed with shock. He'd seen everything and processed nothing. Gina paused at the kitchen door, her bag slung over her one shoulder. She didn't look back at the carnage, didn't check Victor's wounds or count the bodies. She'd already calculated the damage, assessed the fallout, and made her decision. She was leaving, disappearing, becoming a ghost again. Carlo had seen people run before, criminals fleeing crime scenes, witnesses escaping danger, cowards abandoning fights. This was different. Gina wasn't running from something. She was running because it's what she'd been doing for so long she'd forgotten there was any other option. "Wait," Carlo said. She stopped, hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn around. Carlo stepped between Gina and the exit, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. His hands stayed visible, open and empty. "I'm not stopping you," he said quietly, "just asking you to listen for 30 seconds. Gina's hand shifted slightly, and Carlo realized she'd already calculated 17 different ways to incapacitate him and leave through that door. The knowledge didn't frighten him, it clarified things. I don't know your real name, don't know what agency trained you or what you're running from, don't need to know. Then what do you want? Her voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of someone who'd already left. To say thank you, and to make you an offer. I don't work for people anymore. Not asking you to work for me, I'm offering you something you haven't had in 3 years. He gestured toward the carnage behind them. An ally. She didn't move, but something shifted in her expression, not quite interest, more like the faint recognition of a concept she'd forgotten existed. You saved my life tonight. More than that, you protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The old man, the cook, my guards. He paused. You could have just walked out the back when the shooting started. Nobody would have blamed you, but you stayed. Staying was tactical. They would have hunted witnesses. Bullshit. The word came out harder than he intended. You stayed because you're tired of running, tired of watching good people die while you survive. Her jaw tightened. He'd struck something through. I've got resources, money, connections, people who owe me favors in 20 countries. Whatever agency or government is hunting you, I can make them stop, permanently. Nothing's permanent. No, but I can give you something close to it. He met her eyes, letting her see the sincerity. No servitude, no debt, no strings, just protection in exchange for one thing. What? Stop running. He kept his voice steady, certain. Let someone stand beside you for once. You spent 3 years surviving alone. Maybe it's time to try living with backup. Gina stared at him, and for the first time since the lights came back on, Carlos saw something other than tactical assessment in her expression. He saw the exhausted, terrified woman beneath the weapon. I don't trust easily, she said finally.
Neither do I, Carlos smiled slightly. That's why this might actually work. 6 months later, Rosie's diner looked different in the morning light. The bullet holes were gone, patched and painted over. New booths replaced the ones destroyed in the firefight, the vinyl a brighter shade of green. The front windows were bulletproof now, though they looked identical to the originals. The security cameras were discreet, professional, nearly invisible. But it was still Rosie's, still served the same terrible coffee and the same perfect cherry pie. Gina poured a cup at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, the ceramic familiar and grounding in her hands. She wore the same uniform, the same ponytail, moved with the same efficient grace. But everything had changed. She chose to be here now. That made all the difference. Carlo sat in booth 7 with his newspaper, reading about a series of mysterious deaths among Eastern European intelligence operatives, former agents and contractors, all connected to a classified operation in Kandahar 3 years prior, all found dead within the same week. He didn't comment on the article. Gina didn't thank him. Some things didn't need to be spoken aloud. If this story of redemption and finding family in unexpected places touched your heart, thank you for being here. These tales exist because of you. Smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a heart in the comments if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. It keeps these stories alive. She refilled his coffee without being asked. He nodded his appreciation without looking up. The rhythm was comfortable, familiar, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. She wasn't his employee. She was his equal, his partner, the person who'd saved his life and discovered in the process that maybe her life was worth saving too. Through the window, she could see them, 30 men in discreet positions around the block, not there to kill, there to protect. Her security detail, handpicked by Carlo from his most trusted soldiers, men who'd proven their loyalty and their discretion. She'd spent 3 years believing her skills made her toxic, that everyone she got close to died. But maybe she'd had it backwards. Maybe her skills didn't make her a harbinger of death. Maybe they made her a guardian of life. The difference was just choosing who to protect and when to act.
The elderly man from that night came in for his usual breakfast, taking his regular booth in the back. He smiled at Gina, called her sweetheart, left a generous tip. He never asked about the scars on her knuckles or why the diner had closed for renovations. The line cook worked the grill, humming off-key to the radio. Normal, safe, peaceful. Gina had finally learned the difference between surviving and living. Surviving was running forever, alone and exhausted. Living was standing still long enough to build something worth defending.